It's all here. Don't take my word for it. I received good book reviews from San Francisco Book Review, Midwest, multiple others, and again, the Independent Institute, the Claremont Institute, the McKinnon Institute, and I forget the fourth one, are looking into this. So there's something there. Now I want to switch it up. What does this mean for you, specifically you? Everybody feel their wallet? You feel where your wallet is in your pocket? Okay. Hold that feeling. A little bit? Okay, yeah. So, you have the opportunity to become the richest nation on the earth because Switzerland is the richest country in the world for the last 200 years. They've had the highest living standard for the last 100 years. They have the lowest unemployment rate right now, and they've effectively never had a recession in the last 200 years. You take over their economy, you can have that, but it gets better. You can have a California where half of your taxes are gone. Yeah. I'm not joking. You can have a California where half of your bureaucracy for every business is gone. You can have a California where your roads, dams, bridges, seaports, airports, levees, and everything else that's in infrastructure is brought up to first world status. Right now, all of your seaports, airports, schools, levees, dams, bridges, government buildings are the worst in all of America. If you type in California, comma, roads, comma, worst, you will see pages of official federal government reports placing California about 45 out of 50. Type in schools, type in federal buildings, type in bridges, type in levees. It's all the same story. Did you know that the levee over Sacramento is as bad as the one over New Orleans before Katrina? Did you know that the federal government has known about this for 10 years and has done nothing? Did you know that if that levee over Sacramento broke, it would displace 1 million people, 500,000 homes, and possibly kill about 9,000 people? This has been known for 10 years. They did nothing. And it gets worse. For 30 years, 3 decades, you have had the worst roads, schools, dams, bridges, airports, seaports, levees in all of America. But it gets worse. Because you've had the money to have the best of all of that. But that money goes to other people who have had roads, dams, schools, levees, airports, seaports better than you, according to the federal government, for 30 years. I want to repeat that. Your infrastructure is horrible. Other people already have better infrastructure. For 30 years, you have paid for them to have things better than you. 30 years. Every year, you pay federal income taxes. And just to do a survey, most people's state income tax is less than their federal income tax. Is that generally correct? Yeah. I'm seeing heads nod? Okay. What I'm telling you is that you're wasting your entire state income tax that you pay every single year. Wasted. You pay federal income tax. It pays for military, Social Security, etc. You pay for all the services you need. And then there's $120 billion left over in federal income tax that you receive absolutely nothing for. Every single year for 30 years. This money goes in the form of grants to pay for 35 other states to have roads, bridges, dams, seaports, airports, etc. better than you. Federal government has rated all of your infrastructure worst in the entire country, and yet every single year they've taken $120 billion extra to make sure that 35 other states have it better than you. Does that seem remotely fair? 30 years, this has gone on. We don't even talk about it. Schwarzenegger made a few comments and Representative Jackman Spear. He didn't pick up any traction. So, when you see bridges collapse, when you see schools in need of repair, when you see potholes, when you go into downtown Oakland and you feel the hopelessness, and you see a section of the freeway that's literally rotting out, I want you to think, doesn't have to be that way. And somebody else has it better. And I get to have ghettos and the worst schools in my state for 30 years, but other people don't even have to deal with this. They're taking my money to make sure other people have a better life than me. And they've done it for 30 years. This affects your children, it affects you, it affects your grandkids, it will affect your grandkids' grandkids. What's going to happen in 30 years? Somebody else is going to be up here talking to your grandkids. This has gone on for 30 years. Why is it going to stop? They're not going to stop a money train. It's good cash. Nobody's complaining. Californians are almost completely ignorant about this. They're not going to do anything. You keep milking that cow and taking everything until the bones start showing on that cow, and you don't care because you get your milk. But it gets worse. Because for the federal income taxes that you do pay, you don't even get the services you pay for. So every single year, how many people have heard about the issue of border security? The border's not secure, right? Seeing a couple heads nod. You pay national security. Every nation on the planet is supposed to protect their borders. The federal government doesn't. So the state diverts state resources, CHP and other officers, to provide additional manpower at the border to meet the level required because the federal government doesn't. So you pay taxes for border security, you don't get it, then taxes are dipped into a second time out of your state taxes to pay for the same service. That's 200% tax. But it gets worse. National security. How many of you know that for 5 years, half a decade after 9/11, you never got your 9/11 security money? Did you know that? Director Chertoff of Homeland Security, when he retired, said California was the most vulnerable to attack state in all of America for a terrorist attack. This is in the years right after 9/11, and yet you never got your security money for 5 years. Do you know who paid for the nuclear radiation detectors in the seaports to make sure you weren't blown up? You. Federal government's supposed to pay for it. That's what you pay federal income taxes. You got nothing. Then they had to raise a special tax on trucker container fees as they came through Oakland and LA. That meant goods in the local economy, which is here, went up. So the price of your goods and services went up, and that was an indirect tax to pay for national security. Something you already paid for. That's another 200% tax. But it gets worse. Every season, we have fire season, right? Homes burned, people have to move, national emergency. Those are called national emergencies for a reason. The government, from the feds and the rest of the country, is supposed to come and help. That's why you put common resources. Our government does not even ask the federal government for help during fire season. You pay federal income taxes, it pays for national emergencies, you get nothing. The governor then dips into the state income to pay for helicopters from neighboring states so that we have the amount of firefighting capability that we need during fire season every single year. That's 200% tax. But it gets even worse. Because even though you pay $120 billion into the pot, more than you ever use, and you've done this for 30 years, you actually have no insurance policy if things go bad. Everybody remember when Schwarzenegger went to the feds a few years ago and asked for a bailout for the economy? It was about $20 billion. We got ridiculed in every single national newspaper as spin-happy, crazy liberals with no fiscal discipline. We needed $20 billion to get out of the hole during our worst recession ever. We got ridiculed. $20 billion is 1/5 of what you paid for the last 30 years, and you got nothing. President Obama's not the only person. We had a recession during Bill Clinton. California went to Bill Clinton. Can you help us out? No. Clinton talked about how he loved California. When it came time to pay up, he got nothing. George W. Bush didn't like us. Bush Sr. didn't like us. So what you need to think is, Democrat, nothing. Republican, nothing. Democrat, nothing. Republican, nothing. For 30 years. You get nothing. You pay into this system, and it gets even worse because the federal government can't bail out California if it ever needed. If California truly needed a bailout of money to keep our economy refloating, we are too large for the federal government to financially bail out. So you're paying for an insurance policy you can never cash in on. That's another waste of tax. So let's review. You lose $120 billion. You pay for multiple services that every country in the world gets, but you don't get. And this has gone on for 30 years. Nobody's talking about it, and there's no plans to get out of it. But it gets even worse. Because Schwarzenegger, when he was governor, you may remember this, he went to Asia. Took business people from California. They went over there, met all the people, signed all the contracts, worked out all the details. It was designed for California businesses to exactly ship products to what the Asian economies needed. Everything was worked out, and they got all the paperwork and they put it right on Washington, D.C.'s desk, and it sat there. It sat there for 5 years under George W. Bush. It sat there for 5 years under President Barack Obama. Two totally different presidents with totally different politics. Exact same reaction to California. This is during the recession. Both presidents talked about how They feel for everybody in the recession, and they need California to get better. We could have had 150,000 jobs. They sat on it. We have the option to pull ourselves out, and you are blocked. There's a professor named Abraham Lowenthal out of USC. He wrote a book called Global California Rising, just talking about the amount of trade deals that you lose. California's economy is about 25 to 45% linked to the international economy. The average US state is 5%. So when we need trade deals and we're ready to go, guess what? Your issues aren't important. You can wait, and you can suffer during the middle of a recession when you have a way to get yourselves out. By the way, they haven't approved those trade deals yet. So who knows, maybe. What's it all mean? You make moves to give California subnational sovereignty, which has been used by 25 nations around the world, including Scotland and Hong Kong. All democracies, all stable economies, all have great relations with their current host nation. We look into that system, and what you get is the dollar and the military, and all business contracts stay intact. But all other policy decisions, immigration, banking, border security, return to California. And for the first time ever, you have the freedom to do a couple things. A, stop being milked like a cow that's about ready to die. Keep your money in state that you actually earn. Pay for your schools and your ghettos. B, make sure you don't pay for services that you don't ever use. And C, you start signing international trade contracts that are designed for the California economy at the speed of California. And you get people back to work and get us out of this recession. And you look into replacing Switzerland as the global center, because if you do, your children will never know unemployment or poverty for the rest of their lives. Subnational sovereignty is rare, but it is stable. Scotland has done it in the last 5 years. Scotland was a colony of England for the last 400 years. All decisions were made in London. In the last 5 years, through a series of debates and televised speeches, they went to subnational sovereignty. Military, dollar, business contracts intact, everything else returned to Scotland. And a couple things. One, the Queen of England has given a commendation to the Royal Scots Highlanders 3rd Brigade for their valor in Afghanistan. That's post-subnational sovereignty. Marriage rates between Britons and Scottish people have actually gone up. That's post-subnational sovereignty. It's a different form of partnership, but it's not a separation. That's the key difference. I'll stop here and I'll turn it over to questions.
Ben.